In today's video, we're going to make an amigurumi ghost on the knitting machine. You're going to need white yarn, polyfill, safety eyes, and there's also an option to create a little hat for him. And if you do that, you're going to need the smaller knitting machine, either the Sentro or the Addi. Let's get started. Cast on with white. And then do 62 rounds. Cut a fairly long tail, release the yarn into the center of the machine, and go around once without feeding any yarn in. Thread your needle, and now we're going to pick all these stitches off the machine. And there's our piece. Place that piece aside, and now I'm going to make the circular bottom. So we're going to cast on again, and we're going to make a flat circle. I got this flat circle pattern from Yay for Yarn, so please check out her channel. She does all kinds of really interesting creative projects. So we're just casting on first. And we're going to do 36 rounds. Cut a tail. Release this yarn into the center of the machine and go around once without feeding in any yarn. Thread your needle. And then remove these stitches from the machine. And your piece will look like this. Now let's put the circle together. Stretch your yarn, and then we're going to pull both ends so that it pinches tight. There's one end, and then we're going to pull this end. And then when you take these two pinched ends together and you bring them close to each other, it creates a circle. Tighten these as best as I can. I'm going to thread my needle, insert the needle through the center, bring it all the way through and through the center of the other side. And that brings your two ends together. Tighten the other side as well, lay it out flat. And now I'm just going to tie a couple of knots to secure this. And then lastly, I'm going to take my needle. We're going to get rid of these tails, so just insert it anywhere in the piece, pull it through, trim, and do the same to the other side. And there is the base for the ghost. Now we're going to construct the body. You're going to need your fiber fill and a pair of safety eyes. I used the largest safety eyes that I have. Stretch your yarn, which I haven't done yet, and we're going to create a brimless beanie. I'm going to pull the yarn on one end, and I'm going to cinch this end like this. I'm going to trim this tail because it's very long. Thread your needle, and I'm going to put this yarn through the center point. I'm going to grab it on the inside and pull this through. Now I'm going to flip this edge inside to meet the top of the open side. And now I'm going to pull the tail of the opposite side and make sure this tail of the side you just pulled is sticking out the back. Make sure this doesn't get tucked inside. So now I'm going to pull this side and I'm going to tighten this edge as well. And so this creates a little hat. So just make sure your pieces are tight, that you don't have any holes. I'm going to tie a couple of knots to secure the top. I'm also going to get rid of these two tails right now. So at this point, we're going to put this top rounded dome on top of the circle base that we made. But for right now, we're going to fill the top. I'm going to put in my eyes after I fill it so that I can see exactly where I want to position the eyes. And now I'm going to decide where I want to put my eyes. I think I want one there and I want one here. I like where this one's located, so I'm going to place my stopper. as we sew the base onto this, we can add more stuffing as we go. Now we're going to attach the base. I'm going to use a crochet hook to do this, but you could also just cut a long thread and use a needle to do it as well. So I have my base piece here. I'm going to lay flat, and I have the top of the ghost here. So I'm going to flip the ghost upside down, and I'm going to place this base piece on top. But I want the base piece to kind of slip inside a little. Grab your yarn, line these two edges up, insert your crochet hook, pull this through, do a chain 1, and now I'm just going to slip stitch across the edges. And that's what the edge is going to look like, but this is going to be covered by the ruffled skirt that we're going to put on the ghost. And I'm going to continue doing that to about here so that I can decide if I want to add more stuffing or not. So I've slip stitched all the way around, and I do want this to kind of sink in a little bit because I want it to be able to stand up straight. If you overstuff, it won't be up straight. I'm just looking at this and trying to decide, do I want to add a little more? Maybe just a little. And then this is your opportunity to kind of redistribute your polyfill. And then now I'm just going to slip stitch to the end. I'm nearing the end here. Cut the yarn, I'm just binding this stitch off. And then I'm going to hide both of these tails into the center of the piece. And this is what you have so far. So now we're going to do a series of panel knitting. So I'm going to cast on 5 stitches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. For this last one, so that you don't lose this stitch, just make sure you loop the yarn under the notch next to it. Place this into the yarn guide. And now I'm just going to do a bunch of rows of panel knitting. And just be careful in the beginning with your panel knitting because it is going to want to jump up. I did 124 rows, so now I'm going to cut a long tail I can use to attach this. Release the yarn from the machine, and I'm going to free up these stitches. But I'm going to now bind them off with a crochet hook because I want them to be flat. So I'm going to slip stitch each one onto my crochet hook. So just place each stitch onto your crochet hook, yarn over, and pull the yarn through both loops. Put this loop onto my crochet hook, yarn over, and pull this through both loops all the way to the end. And then the last one, I'm just going to pull that loop all the way through like that. Okay, so now we're just going to stretch this. On the opposite end, I'm just going to pull this tail so that it is laying flat like that. I don't want to pinch it so that it doesn't cinch together completely. We just want it to look like that, so eventually we can graft these two sides together. So now I'm going to use some yarn pins. You can use stitch markers, whatever you want to hold this in place so that I can evenly distribute this ruffle around. So I'm going to begin in the back. I'm just going to insert this along, and I'm just going to begin pinching the yarn into ruffles so that I can figure out how I can stitch this. You might have to do this more than once just to make sure that you don't have too much or too little of this tail wrapping around. So now that I've pinned everything in place, this is roughly what it looks like. This is just so that I make sure that I put this ruffle on as evenly as possible. And now I'm going to sew this together. So I'm going to thread my needle. So I'm just Inserting the needle through both pieces. And I'm just going around the circumference. What I'm doing is, as I get to each ruffle, I'm inserting my needle through the bottom of one ruffle, going through the center of the whole piece and out the other side. So again, I'm inserting my needle at the base of the ruffle, going underneath and out the other side. The key is you want your small stitches to be on the outside, but you can put large stitches in the inside. So right here, this is where my yarn is. I'm going to insert right next to it, but then I can do a big stitch on the inside of this piece because you're not going to see that. So I have my two edges here. I'm just going to whip stitch these two sides together. And that's what I have now. So I am just going to insert my needle through the center, pull it out through the top, cut a tail, and there it is. So I'm just going to use my small machine, cast on with black. So I'm doing this for 40 rows. Cut a tail to the center of the machine, go around once, thread your needle, and then pick these stitches off. Pull on this, cinch this edge up, and then this side we're just going to pinch as well. These inside out, thread your needle, pull this through the center, some knots. And then we're going to get rid of these two tails, flip up the brim ever so slightly, and then place the hat wherever you want, and then you can secure that by sewing it down the same way we sewed everything else down. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed this video. If you make this ghost, please let me know. Goodbye.